It was a month ago, we began a conversation about the challenges of change. That was a good change you just experienced. But what we are trying to do is we're wrestling through the idea of why is change so difficult for us? Why is it so hard for us to embrace change when change is a normal part of life? And so as we've been having this conversation about change, we've been following the advice, the ancient wisdom of Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes. And in this conversation about change, today we come to the 5th verse of the 3rd chapter of Ecclesiastes. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 5, my personal favorite of all of the stanzas here in the poem that is Ecclesiastes chapter 3. It is this verse, Ecclesiastes 3:5, that prompted me to study the idea that the parallelism here is an unexpected one, that it is not an antithetical parallelism, but it is a synonymous parallelism, that we understand what he means when he says there's a time to scatter stones, because that is the time to embrace. And what it means to gather stones is the time to refrain from embracing. That gathering stones is to refrain from embracing as scattering stones is to embracing. That what he's talking about is vulnerability and intimacy and walls that we build up and tear down. And how we learn from life that there are moments when we take the risk to tear down the walls and scatter the stones and make ourselves available and vulnerable. And there are times when we need to build up the walls to make ourselves safe, to replenish and restore. I want to have a conversation about that today and how we do that. But before we have that conversation, would you pray with me? Father in heaven, I would ask that the words of my mouth and the meditations of my heart would be pleasing in your sight, and that you would use your word spoken by your servant and anointed by your Spirit to challenge us to embrace the change, to press against the boundaries that we need to tear down, and to make ourselves available to you and to those close to us and to those around us, and to know when to retreat and restore and renew. Pray that you'd give us insight into how to do that. For we ask that in Jesus' name. Amen. Part of what we've been doing during this study is we've been changing the way we do our worship services. And if you're a regular Riverbender, you would notice some of the things, perhaps Angie and Cherie, who came out and sang a cappella just before the message, these little changes. And sometimes it's those little changes like jeans and sneakers and t-shirts that are safe, but remind us that change is a part of life, that sometimes change can make life more interesting. But there are other times when change is really difficult and change is uninvited and unwanted. And so I want to talk about how we know, how we experience change in light of Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 5. And today, as part of doing things a little differently, I want to have a conversation. I want to literally have a conversation with a person who I am honored to call a good friend, who I think of as one of the most interesting and intelligent people that I know. He is brilliantly creative. And every time that we spend time together, every time I'm able to have quality time with him and have conversations, he stretches my boundaries and kind of looks at the world from a different perspective. And that's very refreshing and invigorating for me. And I want you to experience his wisdom. It's an honor for me to call him a friend, but it's even more of an honor to call him and his family Riverbenders. Would you welcome to Riverbend this morning our own Matthew McConaughey. You brought a mug.
And it has musical notes on it, yes.
Now, I've been told that actors need props. It's helpful for you to have a prop, you know, like a cigarette or a
I've
cup
been
of
up
coffee.
since 7 a.m. I just need a little tea.
Okay,
Usually at the next service. So I'm a little earlier today.
This is good, but thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for asking.
This is so amazing. And this is great to have Matthew here today.
Thank you.
But I realize this is a risk for you. This is a risk because I know you don't like to think this way, but in your line of work, you hanging out with the rabble that we are, people could perceive that in ways that might not be helpful to you professionally, that might be an indictment of things. And I appreciate the calculated risk that it is for you to be here. I really don't know. I really don't know of another person in your position who has come to a church and given the message. I don't know of anyone who has ever done that. So thank you,
thank you for asking.
For doing that.
I mean,
but
I was a yes as soon as you asked. There was no other consideration.
But I was cautious in asking you because of another thing that I realize is a risk for you, and that is the risk of compromising what this means to your family. I realize when you come here, and I want to thank all of you for the times when you encounter Matthew and his family, and you're very gracious and generous, and it's valuable for you to come here and be one of us.
Yes.
You are a riverbender like the rest of us, and this is not a place where you want to come and be a movie star. This is a place where you want to come and reflect and gather, and I don't want to put that at risk by having you up in front of everybody, because what happens to me is they hear you, and I'm sure they think they know you. It's like, oh, Matthew was in my church, now I can go over to his house. And it doesn't work like that.
Ding dong. Hey. You home?
So, but you understand what I'm saying? It's very important for me that we have the opportunity to just be unimpressed by Matthew McConaughey.
Ah, yes. Yes.
But I do want you to hear what he has to say, because the way he processes his spiritual life and his life in general is fascinating to me, and I wanted to talk to you about how you process change, because you embrace change as aggressively as anybody I have ever met. I mean, in the years I've known you, you've lived in 20 different countries and 30 different cities. You're dragging your family all over the world all the time. You're engaging in roles that challenge you. You're relentlessly curious, and you're constantly pressing your limits. It's like you embrace change. How do you do that?
How do I do that? Numerous ways. I mean, look, I've always been curious. I've always been a traveler. Culture was my greatest educator. I've learned more about myself and my family and my country and our state when I left it and looked back at it. That point of view of getting outside of my own comfort zone and being able to look back at it from an objective point of view has been very rewarding for me and given me a lot of perspective. I have a job that is sort of reliant on change. I like to, literally say that we live in Austin. My wife reminds me all the time, no, we don't. We live on the road. And the family comes with me, and she's right, but we base in Austin. But also in my job, my craft of acting, I see my job is to expose and highlight different parts of humanity. I don't moralize on what those or judge the characters of people I play. As long as I find a character that I go, I know that guy, I've met that guy. So this, relies on a lot of change.
But
for me.
Is there any fear in that?
There's a lot of fear in that. I have a lot of fear in that. I mean, change is part of the fear is part of the buzz for me. Part of the challenge, part of what turns me on is to overcome that fear. Now I have to measure good fear and bad fear. If I'm going to, for instance, go take a role that I'm scared to take, which all of them at some point I'm scared to take, and if I'm not scared to take it, then I'm probably not going to do it. I measure where's my fear coming from? Is it because of just the unknown? Is it because I'm going to dive headfirst into the pool and I don't know what's down there because the lights are off and it's night? Yeah, and if it's that, I usually say that's a good fear. Trust McConaughey, you'll come up on the other side, and you will still have yourself. You won't lose yourself. Then I have a bad fear, which is that maybe I'm not sleeping well at night with the choice I've made. And is it because I don't trust maybe the company that I'm going to go keep, or the place I'm going to go? I don't think that this experience is going to be what I need. Maybe I'm going to go work with the people, the pedigree. I'm not saying, no, that's not up to the excellence that you need to be gathering yourself with, McConaughey. If that keeps me up at night, I usually end up saying no to that choice. So it's a measurement of a good fear and a bad fear for me. But most of them, I find that I can usually, when I choose to go do something and I head out, there's obviously a blind spot there, heading out into the unknown. But it's also, I don't know, it keeps me feeling young inside and turns me on.
Yeah, but you're a person that embraces certain rhythms. There are patterns, there are habits, there are rituals that you embrace.
Yes.
So, but sometimes you even move beyond those or set those aside. I mean, you make change seem really sexy, frankly. But for most of us, change can be somewhat terrifying, unsettling. Why do you think most of us, maybe you, but the rest of us, struggle with change?
Well, I think all of us do. I know I do. As I said earlier, I fear change. And I think it's healthy to fear change. It means you're at least giving it the reverence and respect that it may deserve. You're also giving the reverence and respect to your structure, what you relied on every day that did not change. You're giving that reverence. And that backbone should have reverence. The unknown. We all have a blind spot. It's scary. I don't know what's there. I still cannot do a backflip, literally, because I have a blind spot back there. My motor skills lock up, and I pop into the pool every time. Never been able to do it. There's a little blind spot that we go into before we do accept change. It's like going into the tunnel off a highway. There's that little blind spot where you can't tell if there's a car in front of you or behind you, just a couple of seconds, but it's a blind spot. And that's hard to trust that. Especially when you have something that's working in your life. And I'm a perfectionist. I have my systems, I have structure, especially when I go to work. And I like to follow them. And I've worked to create those for 26 years. You're going to throw a wrench in that and change that on me? I'm like, no, you're not. I'll fight for that. But then also, my job is to rely on that structure. And then when I go out into the world to, as we say, scatter or embrace, as we're going to get to, now let me blow in the wind. I try to create my weather so I can blow in the wind. I have a lot of support doing that. I got a family. I've been doing this for 26 years. I know what I need when I go into the unknown. I know what I need to make sure I'm coming back to home base, to keep myself feeling safe and secure. Another thing with change, though, is sometimes it feels like change becomes a slippery slope. One change creates another change, creates another change, creates another change. And all of a sudden, you're like, wait a minute. Just because I said yes to the first change, where do we end up just saying yes to all the changes? And as scary as I don't like feeling like, I want change to feel earned, whether it's for myself or from the outside world.
What do you mean by that, change being earned?
Being earned. I mean, look, for instance, let's talk politics for a second. If the left is stereotypically yes to all change, and all change is evolution, acceptance of all that.
You really want to go here? You want to do this?
This is dangerous, isn't it? But stereotypically, and the right says, hang on, let's hang on to our backbone of what worked. We can't. I mean, change should be earned. It should be accepted when it's time. But not all change what I would argue is evolution. A lot of change is, but at the same time, we have to respect what got us to where we are personally, as a culture, as a people. Would respect what worked and why it worked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
The way I say it is, all growth involves change, but not all change produces growth.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 5, is a verse that challenges us to change our boundaries. And I know that you've spent some time looking at Ecclesiastes 3:5. Scattering stones, gathering stones.
Yes, sir.
Embracing, refrain to embracing. How do you experience that?
Well, first off, I'd just like to say thank you to Ecclesiastes. It's the first book in the Bible that I got to and I didn't feel guilty about. It's another reason I love this church. The first church I've ever been to that I came to and I walked out and I didn't feel guilty. Thank you. And to a certain point a fan of guilt. I get it. I'm Scottish Irish. I also think guilt means.
I've met your mom.
Yes, you have. Well, we'll talk about her later. She's got a whole other theory on this.
She's got another gear.
But for me, a certain amount of guilt means you give a damn. It means you weren't happy with how I performed yesterday. So I'm going to try and prove that for tomorrow. But Ecclesiastes was a very relaxing book for me. It inspired me in college, and I was like, oh, this is the Saturday of the Bible. This is the fun day of the Bible, and I can't wait to go practice. I let myself off. I can forgive myself or forgive others because of Ecclesiastes.
It wasn't just the eat, drink, and be merry part of Ecclesiastes?
I'm still practicing that one, for sure. For sure.
Because I'm digging that part.
Yeah, right? So, to gather and scatter. Look, for me, gathering is a time to take inventory. Church on Sunday, it's a time to take inventory. Time for me to come in and be number two beneath worshiping God. It's a time for me to look at my last week. How did I do? What can I improve on? What message did I get from you that I can take out into the week and put into practice? And when I go into the week, that's the scattering. But the Sunday is a gathering. Sleep is gathering. Sleep as forgiveness. Sleep as rest. Sleep has given us some rest so we can get up and be the most ourselves the next day. Recently had a death in our family. My mom's boyfriend of 18 years passed away. The family came together to mourn his passing. That was a gathering time. It's a very sobering time, gathering. I'll go on some walkabouts by myself, grab a backpack and go to places where no one knows my name. That's a gathering time because I'm forced to be with myself and to listen to myself. Gathering time is when memory catches up with me. Gathering time is nice when I'm in a place and all of a sudden that truth comes dancing across and just drops in my head. I'm like, oh, I was hooked up to the main vein on that one. You can take that truth, McConaughey, into the world and go scatter that, because that's a natural law.
How do you know when it's time for you to pull back? I mean, because your life is on display.
Right.
And there are things that you have to do to make yourself available.
Yeah.
How do you know when it's time? I mean, what are the clues? What do you?
Yeah, the
how
clues
do you measure
for me,
that?
I can get a little. I've got a lot of resilience and a lot of endurance. At the same time, when I get a little ragged on the edges, maybe I haven't had enough sleep, maybe I'm really working, burning a candle at both ends, and I'm busy, and all of a sudden I'm not feeling the demarcation between the days or the events, and it's all kind of bleeding together. And I'm pretty good when I'm on autopilot, but I still can get a little chafed at the ends, and all of a sudden, it's what comes out of my mouth, what comes in my head. When I'm too fatigued, the thought process in my head, I'm not shaking hands with that, I don't like it, or what comes out of my mouth, I'm like, you know what, McConaughey, you better just shut up, because you're not seeing straight right now. You're tired, or you have a low eye, my eye will get low, and that's when I know I need to pull back. I need to rest, I need some quiet time, I need to go sit with myself, I need to take a long drive, or I need to go back and do some simple thing like I'm going to sit down and you know what, give my dog a 20-minute rub. That's a time to gather.
Yeah, I know. You have this sort of legendary urban legend kind of wanderlust, this nomadic Airstream trailer sort of a personality.
Yeah.
But now in your life, I mean, do your kids, does Camilla, are they good sort of barometers of, hey Matthew, you need to dial it back. You need to pull in the margins a little bit.
Well, I mean, by design, you have a family that's already a gathering design because you have basic needs. You become a father, become a husband. You're already centralizing on your life being focused with what's near and dear to you.
Yeah, but you're not doing them any good if you're scattered when you're gathered with them, right?
No.
If you're spent.
No.
So do they kind of say, hey, Matthew, just...
Well, my wife's very good about that. I mean, she's the one who will sometimes tell me, here's the keys, here's your backpack, go take a road trip with yourself, don't call for a week, get out of here. It's one of the reasons we got married. It's beautiful.
Well, I shared after you left in the chapel service the joke. Did you ever hear the joke about the couple, they were married for 50 years? And somebody said, what's the secret? And the guy said, my wife and I have had 2 date nights a week, on Tuesday and Thursday. Yeah. She goes out on Tuesday night, I go out on Thursday night. But you practice some of that, and that's the gathering thing, isn't it? Isn't that what you're saying?
It's a gathering thing. I mean, look, we gather as a family. Camilla and I gather as a couple, but we also respect that we got to gather with ourselves. And sometimes we don't need any other, it's best when there's no other company but ourselves for that. Sometimes it's not a shared experience. Sometimes it's, you know what, I'm going to give a couple days.
Is that what it means by refrain from embracing? If those two go together, gathering is a time to refrain from embracing. Scattering is a time to embrace, to be available.
Yes, that's how I see it. So you gather, which is also synonymous with to turn away, which, is that saying, good neighbors, what makes good neighbors a good wall? It's a good one. There's a reason there's a wall there. So that's a time to turn away. In my life, a very public life, I have a lot of people wanting what I have, whether they know me or not. I understand that. But I'm still going to go out and live my life as a citizen, which came long before I was famous, so I'm going to go out and scatter. I'm going to go have experiences. To turn away, there's 24 hours in a day, 37 days a week, 30 days in a month, and 365 days in a year. Sometimes I wish I had 36 hours in a day or 42 or need more time. So I can't be the best of friends with every acquaintance I have. I have a lot of relationships where I need it to be at sort of a 35 millimeter wide lens. It's a bit of an arm's distance. We don't have to be deep and meaningful relationships with everybody that I know. I have some people that are acquaintances. We cross each other twice a year. It's great to see you. It's great to see you. How are we doing? We spend time together, pick it right up, but then say goodbye. And then there's other relationships that are, much more intimate. So I measure that daily. I'm not if anything that's with my fame, if anything that's sort of I could be better at that than I used to be, is being a friend. I could be a better friend to a lot of my friends now. But I had family, and they all understood that all of a sudden, you can't just say, hey, tomorrow let's head to Timbuktu, take a backpack, we'll be back, take a one-way ticket. Can't do that anymore. I understand that. Mm-hmm. So I have my boundaries, but also talk about if I'm gathering well, and if I think we all gather well, much more adept at going out and being vulnerable and available, but yet not losing myself.
Mm-hmm. I want to make sure everybody understands. I want to make sure you understand what Matthew's saying here, because I think he's absolutely on point. That there is this need to create margins, to create boundaries, to gather stones, to refrain from being available and vulnerable. But there's also a time when you want to tear those walls down, you want to make yourself available. How do you know the difference? How do you say, okay, I'm too cloistered, I'm too much of a hermit, or I'm too scattered, I'm too everywhere?
Yeah. I mean, that's a dance, isn't it? I mean, if, like I said, for me, I come to say church or have my own time on Sundays or my own personal time. Then I take that into the week to go scatter. I turn people away when I'm getting ready for a job, and then I get into the job and I'm fully embracing it. It's one's relying on the other. I mean, I'm not sure if there's a science to know when to do which, but I know that I feel I do need both, and that we all do need both. It's a dance between the two. If you did nothing but gather, you'd be a hoarder, you'd be a hermit, So if you did nothing but scatter, you'd be over leveraged. You'd have a little. I remember when I about 10 years ago, when I decided to make a change in my career, I got a phone call from my office at a production company, and I saw the number on my phone come from the office, and I went to pick it up, and I hesitated. And I went right then, what are you doing with a production company that you're paying the bills and you're paying the salary, and you don't want to pick up the phone? And I knew right then, I've got to get rid of the company. So I got rid of the company, I got rid of the music label that I had produced a couple of albums, and I said, you know what, I want to be an actor for hire, I want to have my foundation, and I want to have my family. That's the 3 things I want on my desk. Instead of those other 2, which I had 5. When I had 5 things on my desk, I was making about B+ on all 5. I got rid of 2, and I said, I want to be 100% on 3, and I got to focus my time. That was a turning away, so I could gather. Yeah. And I was able to focus on the things that were really important to me by eliminating a couple of things.
Yeah, I want to make sure you understand that, because I believe that's the essence of what Solomon is sharing with us. I want to share with you something, Matthew, you wrote to me earlier this week. This is what he said about Ecclesiastes 3:5. He said, the one cannot truly happen well without the other. You don't gather, you won't know what to scatter. If you don't scatter, you won't need to gather. You don't embrace, you will have nothing to turn away. If you don't turn away, you won't truly be giving of yourself when you do embrace. Don't be afraid to take the adventure that this dance is. For me, to scatter is to embrace, and to gather is to turn away. They're connected.
Yes.
The two is not either or, it's both and.
It's and. It's a paradox, not a contradiction. I mean, they're always to gather is to turn away, to scatter is to embrace. These are in constant conversation, I think. I mean, there's this constant reciprocity between the two. And I think we could go as far as say they're reliant on each other. So there is a dance here. It's the and instead of the or, the but. There's not a science of when to. I mean, it does say, Ecclesiastes, there is a time to. There's a time for each one of these. I don't think there's a science that anyone can say this is the time. We all have to ask ourselves personally, when is that time for me to scatter? When is that time?
How do you see that playing out in our culture, in the world that we live in, that the seasons where somebody else may be in a gathering season, but I'm in a scattering season, and now we're in conflict because we're out of rhythm.
Yeah, and I wouldn't say we necessarily need to be in conflict because because we're in a different rhythm. About being in conversation because we're in a different rhythm. I mean, there's in times where we could say it's most divisive times, Ecclesiastes is really something that's saying no. What seem to be two opposites actually are reliant on each other. There is a dance and embrace that the two have to have. There's a time for each, but one relies on the other. One cannot exist without the other. That's really great thing from Ecclesiastes. I think we can take as far as an overview in the culture in our times right now, and we can apply that personally. We can apply that as a culture and a society, and that doesn't mean that all change means we have to lose what we relied on so much. It doesn't mean that. Again, it's not one or the other. And I know I've found in my life as many times as I can say and appreciate what seemed to be a polar opposite. Even if it's a difference, not a similarity, that I've been much happier with myself. On a selfish level, been more happy with myself. And I think that's a great thing to take away from Ecclesiastes, that these what seems to be opposites actually rely on each other.
Well, I think one of the things I admire about you is your openness to ideas, to creativity, to how you can grow. And I think Ecclesiastes says, yeah, that's a good rhythm. That's a good place to be. But if you were going to kind of leave us with something like pure McConaughey,
Yeah.
about Ecclesiastes 3:5 and about change, kind of bring it home so we can take that with us.
Well, it's basically for me what I was just saying in the answer to the last question, that it is a dance. It is an adventure. Change is going to happen. How do we customize that change for ourselves, where I get something out of it, and it also happens to be what's best for the most amount of people? I call it the egotistical utilitarian. You know, it's right there in the honey hole, slipstream, right between the two, and where what's good for me is good for all of us. And I think we all have that can have that choice for ourselves, and you know, not to see it all as this or that. It's this and that, and then be discerning. When is it time for this, and when is it time for that? For me, for us. But there is a time for each. There is, and enjoy that dance. And you know, that's it.
Customize the change. I like that so much. Can you thank Matthew McConaughey for being with us today?
Have a good Sunday. Have a good week. Thank you, man.
Well, that was different. But that's a good different, right? That's a good different. And you see, this is, I think, what we want to experiment with and have a conversation about in our conversation about the challenges of change, is that we can press into it, that we don't have to resist it, or we don't have to chase after it exclusively, that there's a balance, that there is a time to scatter stones, and that's a time to be available, to be vulnerable, to embrace. And there's a time to gather stones, to say, I need me time, to refrain from embracing, to say, I need space, I need margins, I need to find a refuge, I need to build up the walls again. But then there comes a time when we say, okay, I'm too closed off. I need to take more risk, and I need to tear down the walls and scatter the stones and embrace the change. And I hope what you heard in Matthew was a life that is lived very much in that willingness to know when to pull back and kind of find time for ourselves, to be selfish, and the time when it's time to take the risk and to tear down the walls and to embrace the new and the different. It's the wisdom of Ecclesiastes. It's the challenge of change. And so I'm thankful that we can be a community that embraces that. As Kathy Smock comes and closes us, would you pray with me for a moment? Father, thank you for Matthew and for his family, for all of the families here at Riverbend Church, and for their faithfulness and the faithfulness of this community to challenge ourselves to change and to embrace change. Pray that we would receive that and find where those boundaries are necessary and where they need to be torn down. Pray that for myself, for my family, and for all of us here. But we ask this together in Jesus' name. Amen.